thank you. So we're going to call this meeting to order. This is the regular City Council meeting for the City of Encinitas. It's 6 p.m. on Wednesday, February 17, 2021. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Hensy.
Here.
Councilmember Moscow.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kranz.
Here.
And Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
Record will show that all members of the City Council are present.
Okay, great. I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we have two special presentations today. The first one that we'll go to is the SDG&E Reliability Update by Katie Scanlon. And I'll turn it over to you, Katie.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members and staff. I am going to share my screen. I have some slides prepared for this item. Let me know if you're able to see this.
We are.
Okay, perfect. Let me put it into slideshow mode. Awesome. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Scanlon. I am a public affairs manager with SDG&E, and I'm here tonight to talk about some infrastructure upgrades that are occurring within the city of Encinitas, and also touch on a particular circuit on the eastern region of the city that we refer to as Circuit 1001, as it's experienced quite a number of outages over the past year. And so just wanted to share some analysis that our team has put together on that, and then some steps that we're taking to improve the service to those customers moving forward. So I'm going to start at a kind of a 10,000 foot level and just talk about some high fire threat risk that's neighboring to the city of Encinitas, some general information about some wildfire mitigation efforts that SDG&E is undertaking this year and is continuing through 2021. And then the end of the presentation will really focus on those infrastructure upgrades for kind of within the city of Encinitas, and then specific focus on Circuit 1001. So this kind of gives you a view of our entire service territory. That bottom left image shows what is defined as high fire risk. So the tier 3 is determined to be the highest risk for fire. Tier 2 is the next lowest level. And so the picture on the right zooms in on the city of Encinitas, and you'll see the majority of the city isn't within either tier 2 or tier 3. However, the most eastern parts of Alevenheim do barely touch that tier 2 area. And some interesting statistics just about high fire threat district in general is that it covers about 64% of our service territory, which for frame of reference is about 4,100 square miles. We have about 3,500 overhead miles within either that tier 2 or tier 3 area. We service 206,000 customers within both of those tiers. We have 220 weather stations, which help us gather information about the microclimates that are all within our service territory, because it's very diverse. We have coastal, inland, mountain, and desert areas. We have 61% of our system is undergrounded, which is a really high percentage when you're comparing to other utilities across the nation. And we have a lot of trees that we're monitoring, about 450,000 trees within that are living in or around power lines. So we want to make sure that they're trimmed at certain times. We monitor their growth speed to make sure we can maintain proper clearances for safety reasons. This summarizes some of our top advancements from 2020. We are just barely into 2021, and we just filed our plan for what we would like to do for this year. So it's going through the process with our regulator, and will hopefully be approved soon. But these are some of the notable achievements that we were able to accomplish from last year. I'll touch on a lot of these. I won't go into each of them one by one, but at the highest level, they all contributed to a 30% reduction in what customers experience for a public safety power shutoff event. So for those of you that are not familiar with a public safety power shutoff event, it's basically a last resort effort for the utility to keep the community safe when we have adverse weather conditions, either high winds, a red flag warning, things of that nature. So a lot of the things listed on this slide are improvements to tools, leveraging technology with artificial intelligence, and just improvements to the grid infrastructure itself to improve safety, reliability, and resilience across the board. So I'll talk about a couple of them as well, but one of the others that I would like to specifically highlight on here is our new Vegetation Risk Index. So this is a newer enhancement to our program, and it basically, the team has created an algorithm that helps project how fast and how quickly trees are growing and what type of risk that overlays in terms of our system. So, and we're not only taking into account the types of the physical infrastructure themselves that provides electricity service, but things that surround the infrastructure as well when we're trying to figure out what areas should be upgraded and when. This next slide highlights some of the technological enhancements that we have added to how we're able to work with leveraging partnerships with different types of organizations and universities. One of the coolest features that I personally think is how we're leveraging AI-based forecasting to help us give more advanced notice on when we think we might be having these weather conditions. And it's also helping to feed improvements on our wildfire modeling. So in the event that there was an ignition, that we are able to predict where the fire will actually go. And this information is shared with first responders and local fire departments. And we're always looking for new ways to collect more information. And so the AI is continuing to improve since it has launched. It started with leveraging the 10 years worth of data that we have been collecting with our weather stations. And as it collects more and more data, it gets smarter. And the team was really happy with how it performed in 2020 in terms of giving us advanced notice on when we think we might have these severe weather conditions. This just gives a preview on how we communicate with customers during PSPS events. So the city of Encinitas had a circuit last year that was impacted by a PSPS event. It straddles the border of Liebenhain and also serves some customers in the Rancho Santa Fe area. And when we have these events, they're often fast moving and we have to communicate a lot of information pretty quickly. The best way, obviously, is we're communicating with customers that are directly impacted. So it's extremely important for people to have their contact information updated with SDG&E because we're sending outbound texts, dialers when we are approaching these events when we think we might be at risk for having one. And so to kind of walk through the process, 7 to 10 days ahead is when our meteorology team basically says, we think something is materializing where we might have an event. We start to coordinate with local agencies and first responders. 3 to 6 days is when the forecast kind of, materializes a little bit more. Once we hit the 2 to 3 day mark, that is when we start launching our communications because the weather we are pretty confident that we're going to have an event. So we communicate with local governments. This is also when we start sharing more geographical information on the types of communities that we think could possibly be impacted by a public safety power shutoff event. 1 day ahead is when we also start give another communication to say we still think this is a high probability. And then in the event that we actually have to shut the power off, then that's when we also send out notifications to customers and governments. So the key question that I think we get a lot of questions about from the community is, the wind has subsided or the winds have stopped. How come my power has not been turned back on yet? And the key step that we have to do to make sure we're restoring power safely is we have to patrol every single line to make sure that, debris or branches have not blown into our lines. The last thing we want is to turn the power back on and have an ignition at that point. So we have crews inspect every single line for safety before we're able to turn the power back on. And we actually have contract fire crews on site as well in the event that there is something that happened that they're able to quickly, deal with the spark. So, and then we'll of course let everyone know when power has been restored. So this is a high level process of all the different communication points that we not only do directly with impacted customers, but local agencies and governments as well. The best way to get information through the event is we just launched a new app in August of last year. So even if you live in Encinitas, but you might have a relative or a loved one that lives in other parts of the county, you can save their addresses up to 5, and it will notify you on those main kind of communication milestones that I just walked you through on the last slide. So it'll tell you changes in weather conditions, if the actual event didn't actually materialize. So we might have notified customers to say they're at risk, but then the weather conditions improve and we don't actually have to shut off power, which is always the best scenario. So it's a really great feature that we launched last year and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback on. So feel free to download that. And now I'm going to transition into the particular circuit that has experienced a lot of outages in 2020. And I know Councilmember Mosca has individually received a lot of inquiries from residents that live on the circuit. So in response to a lot of the inquiries, we did a deep dive and analysis on the particular circuit. And for a frame of reference, it services about 1,300 customers. And we found there's a lot of work that we've done in the area for upgrades. And in order to safely allow for work to happen, we had 13 planned outages. And I'll kind of summarize some of the work that we did last year and more work that we have planned. But unfortunately, there was 13 unplanned outages, which is a really high number. That's not something that a lot of customers experience throughout our service territory. So to dive into that number a little bit more, 6 were related to equipment failures. So, something had either at each reached the end of its reachful life. And about 7 or so were out of our control. One was related to like a car hitting a power line. Another one was a tree branch had fallen into one of our lines. So kind of ancillary situations where we still were able to restore power, but it wasn't necessarily something that we could control. So in terms of a lot of the work that we're doing in this area is we're trying, and the reason why I wanted to talk about a lot of the public safety power shutoff event information first is to kind of frame some of the upgrades that we're planning for this circuit to mitigate risk in the event that there is another public safety power shutoff event. So since the circuit services about 1,300 customers, ideally we're trying to find ways that we can divide up the circuit. So if we have a weather condition that comes through, but we only have concern about a particular area, then we can shut off power to a smaller group of customers instead of taking out all 1,300. So we've installed these Scada switches, is the industry technical term for it, but basically allows us to be more surgical with the approach in the future if we have more of these public safety power shutoff events. Another upgrade that we're putting all throughout, specifically the Rancho Santa Fe area and areas of the high fire threat district that I showed on that first slide, is what we call wireless fault indicators. So if something were to happen or a piece of equipment were to fail, it basically tells our crews exactly where the point is, so they don't have to search the entire line to figure out what was wrong. So it helps with quicker restoration time. New cable was installed on this circuit about 1,800 feet last year. And then another kind of upgrade that wasn't within the boundaries of the city of Encinitas, but it does service this particular circuit, is we upgraded a substation in Rancho Santa Fe. It's something that we only do a substation like this once every 30 years or so, and we just finished this in December of 2020. And one of the main kind of benefits of this substation upgrade and kind of new lines in the surrounding area is it allows for additional load or electricity to flow on the lines. So one benefit of that being if we're working or need to do work, we can basically minimize the impact to surrounding customers when we are doing work in those areas. So we can actually have crews safely perform on a pole or a line and shift the load to surrounding areas without having those customers experience outages. So it's a great kind of benefit to have those upgrades put in because it gives us more flexibility when we're working and reduces impacts to customers. So looking forward for this circuit, even though we've done a lot of work in the area thus far, we want to make sure those 13 unplanned outages don't happen again in the future. So we have launched a proactive investigative scan on the circuit, and you'll see some pictures of that on the right. And basically what we do, in addition to having not only crews just walk the lines to visually use binoculars and look at the infrastructure itself to see if there's anything that looks out of the norm, is we're launching an infrared scan. So you'll see on the side there, one of them is a picture of the pole and then what it looks like through the scan. And if anything comes up as hot, it means it's kind of reaching the end of its useful life, and it will show up on that picture in a different color, and it lets us know that we need to make a repair. So we launched this in February We have done the main kind of connector points on the circuit have been completed, and we haven't found anything that needs to be repaired, but we are continuing with our search to see and other areas to see if there are things that we may have missed with our first round. So the investigation is ongoing, but so far we haven't found anything else that needs to be repaired. And then looking forward outside of this scan, we have planned to do half a mile of reconductoring, which basically means you're replacing overhead wire with new wire. And we have 9 additional pole replacements planned for this particular circuit. So when the poles are replaced, they go in with steel instead of wood, which makes them more durable and they can withstand higher winds. And it just helps with fire safety as well. So this next slide, I'm going to transition into just the planned upgrades for, so zooming out of Circuit 1000 at the city of Encinitas as a whole. We have 44 fuse upgrades planned for the city for this year. And basically these new fuses that we're installing are approved by CAL FIRE. So it kind of helps further reduce risk with sparks and things of that nature. So we'll be installing 44 of those throughout the city this year. We have 1.2 miles of proactive cable replacement planned. And how we determine proactive cable replacement is we have a lot of teams of engineers that are looking at past failures and a lot of the things that have led to that. And they have created an algorithm that will tell them what parts of what other cable areas that look like this should we basically replace in advance of them failing. So this is a particular program. So 1.2 miles of that will be replaced, 13 grades. Some of the benefits that come with that is we're able to remotely restore power instead of having a crew person go out and actually have to flip the switch to turn the power back on if there was a trip or something that was weather related. 3 sectionalizing devices. So that was what I had talked about where we're able to be more surgical. So it's divvying up the circuits. So if we need to turn off power in certain areas, we don't have to take the entire circuit out. 1.4 miles of reconductoring. So this is it's similar to what I talked about with the proactive cable replacement, but it's on overhead infrastructure. And the one I talked about earlier is on underground cable. And then the last one is 17 pole replacements. So again, it's switching out poles for steel to make them more fire resistant and they're able to withstand higher winds. So I know that was a lot of information and the infrastructure topics can be a little bit, there's a lot of information tedious. So if there's any questions, I have a colleagues that are also joining me. One of them is within our engineering department. I have another person, her name is Kirsten, and Dwayne also accompanying me from external affairs. So happy to take any questions from the mayor or city council at this time. And thank you for the opportunity to come and present tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Katie. It was good to hear an update. You know, I'll say that the thing I'm receiving the most emails about right now is SDG&E's planned removal of Canary Island date palms on Neptune. And if there are any ways around that. So, you know, I don't know if you are prepared to talk about that issue at all, but that is something that is widely unpopular because we love our trees in Encinitas and we like to try to keep them.
Absolutely. I don't have a lot of information on that specific instance, Mayor. I could follow up. I assume they're probably underneath some of our infrastructure, which is why the team is proposing that we remove them. But ironically, we actually are presenting to the Urban Forestry Advisory Commission on the 25th about some other opportunities, and we'd be happy to kind of share some information about this particular instance during that forum as well.
Okay, yeah, I just want to really emphasize the need to, whenever possible, save our trees and replant them in different places or trim them so that the wires and the trees are not in conflict, but we can keep our tree canopy because that is a really critical part of our city. And of course, for all reasons, we know lifestyle reasons, habitat, cooling the climate, providing shade, everything. So just want to emphasize that as an important value.
Absolutely. And we do have, in the instance, I mean, we don't like to remove trees either. In the instance that we do, we either try to move them or oftentimes we can replace them with other trees that are safe to have under power lines. So I'm happy to take an investigative look at that particular situation to see what we can do to help. So thank you for sharing that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mosca.
Yes, thank you, Katie, for being with us today. And thank you to your team and all of the workers at SDG&E. We really do appreciate them. I appreciate you being here also for your partnership, SDG&E's partnership in terms of the delivery of safe and reliable energy power to our city. This presentation's excellent in terms of just really high-level overview of infrastructure and things that you guys are going to be doing in our city to make sure that the delivery of power is safe and reliable. I think everything in terms of globally what we're doing is good. Specifically, Circuit 1001, which is critically important to me, not only because I represent the folks in Alevinheim, but also I live here in Alevinheim, and so I experience those outages. I've experienced those 26 outages, and I can tell you that for myself, my family, and for a lot of residents, it's very frustrating. And so it's good to hear that we are being so proactive to understand why those outages were happening. And so I appreciate that. And I think that some of the things that we're doing in terms of public safety power shutdowns are important. As much as we can micro kind of shut down areas if we need to shut down, that we're basically being very specific about areas that we're shutting down. Again, it's frustrating for residents that may live along Circuit 1001 to have their power shut down because they're told that there's wind or circumstances that are such that there's a high fire risk and the power needs to be shut down. But then they look over the valley and they see all the lights on for neighboring houses, and it's really frustrating to them. And so I think that as we move along and this wildfire season just gets, it expands and it gets tougher for us here in California, we need to be really very specific in how we're shutting this power down. And then once we shut it down, to put it back up as quickly as it's safe to do. Because I think sometimes it goes down and then it's really slow to come back up. And so being very specific about how we're shutting that down. You talked about some of the other, the unplanned outages in terms of, why that happened. There's a lot of folks in specifically Alevinheim that believe that the line is and the circuit itself is fatigued. It's old and in need of replacement. And so I think that talking more about what we're doing to replace equipment and conduit and devices that will make sure that it's not fatigued and that it's upgraded to the maximum extent possible, and that we won't see as many planned outages in the future. I don't know how many unplanned outages were associated with the substation in Rancho Santa Fe. But I'm hopeful that with everything that you're talking about that we've done, that we'll see less unplanned outages in 2021, and then that regarding the PSPS that we're trying to mitigate as much as possible, because even with that we're seeing a lot of residents turn to backup generators and backup generators that many of us would not want to see folks have at their house. And so I think that we really do need to make sure that we're doing as much as possible. And I want to make sure that as you're continuing this review of the line, that you're giving us as much information as possible. We can help you as well. On the other hand, if there's need for additional funding for this line, for upgrades, we want to be right there with you, telling whomever, your CPUC, your regulator, that money is needed for this circuit, so that folks aren't having their power down. And so I think that's important. The other thing too that, aside from this, the other thing that I think that we've experienced too is sometimes just working with SDG&E and relocation of above ground facilities. I know that we have in Rancho Santa Fe road that we've been planning trails along that road, and it's part of a large trails master plan, also our multimodal planning, and that trail has been held up because of not only some public right-of-way issues, but also multitude of above ground facilities that are in the way and poles that need to be relocated, and it's taken some time. And so I think if there's anything we can do to kind of work in a fashion that is just kind of moving these things along the process quicker, I think that we'll all, be really appreciative of that. And then also, a day doesn't go by where people aren't talking about, I know you have, we've done a lot of undergrounding and pole replacement, but a lot of residents are always asking about, undergrounding. And so anything we can do to engage in those conversations about undergrounding more of these old wooden poles in our city. Of course, the steel poles may be important from, kind of a reliability standpoint, but we also don't want ginormous steel poles, in our backyards as well. And so I just want to leave you with all that. I am very thankful that you guys came today, that you're focusing on Circuit 1001. Again, there's a lot of frustrated folks in Levenheim that have that circuit going down an awful lot, and 26 outages. I know some of my colleagues that live on the western portion of the city probably didn't have any outages all in 2020. And so to have 26 outages in the span of a year is a lot. And so, but it sounds like you guys are focused on it, and anything we can do to help with that, I want to be, helpful. I want to make sure that this is getting improved so that we don't see that type of those numbers in the future. So thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Councilmember Mosca. Oh, do you want to go to, can I respond, or did you want to go to Councilmember Krantz?
Yeah, if you have things you want to respond with. I mean, we don't, we try to manage the time at the beginning of meetings here with our presentations. We have one more and then we have our agenda, but it is a light one. So if you want to go ahead and answer.
Yeah, I will keep it brief then with that in mind. Councilmember Mosca, just in summary of all the things that you mentioned, then your end focus on Circuit 1001 as well. I will assure you that this also has the attention of our senior management team, and our CEO is getting reports on this particular circuit as we're moving through this investigative process. So not only is it at the senior management level, it's at our CEO level as well. So just wanted you to be aware of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Krantz.
Yes, thanks, and I appreciate the presentation. I knew there were these outages on the circuit out there, but I thought they were all planned. So interesting to see how many unplanned there are. I know with some of our other contract, at NCTD, our contractors, we have liquidated damage agreements that are intended to incentivize a significant reduction in shutdowns. So I don't know, I assume that's not part of our franchise agreement, but maybe when we renegotiate it, we should consider something like that, because it just really shouldn't be happening. I appreciate the efforts that are going into keeping it from happening, but if there were some financial incentives, maybe the issues would be resolved sooner. Joe mentioned the idea of undergrounding, and one of my greatest frustrations is that really SDG&E is not incentivized to underground at all. You do make repairs to poles, you replace poles, but there is no obligation on the part of SDG&E to underground, and I find that to be very frustrating. We live in a city that has developed over a course of time that leaves about half the city with all undergrounded utilities and the other half with a bunch of really old, ugly phone poles blocking people's views. So I think that we should be doing more to figure out how to address that. And I would hope that SDG&E would be a partner in figuring out ways to achieve a goal of burying more of the lines that we're dealing with. Every project where we've tried to bury lines has been, met with a long schedule for SDG&E to analyze the undergrounding. Birmingham is one that comes to mind. I know there were some difficulties getting the work done on Santa Fe when we undergrounded the utilities there. The San Alejo, when we did the Cardiff Coastal Rail Trail, there were some challenges. It's just sometimes very difficult. And, I do appreciate, the work that you guys do, and especially the line workers, but sometimes getting things through the bureaucracy can be a challenge, and I hope we can cut through that. I know our franchise agreement, I believe it goes through 2028 or thereabouts. I know there's a big conversation in the city of San Diego about their franchise agreement, and I would like to get the conversation started about our franchise agreement sooner rather than later. You had a slide in there, it was about the third or fourth slide that mentions the idea of microgrids. And, I'm interested in knowing what SDG&E's plans are for putting in the equipment for microgrids, because some of these outages would be way less impactful if there were microgrids installed that we were able to incentivize to our residents putting solar panels on their rooftops and feeding the batteries that are in these microgrids. There's been incredible advances in technology, and I don't see enough signs that SDG&E is prepared to implement those technology enhancements in our city. And I think that's something that we should be working with you very closely to have that conversation about how to make that happen. We're getting ready to, transition to our community choice energy program. And I know that's going to change the dynamic somewhat. And so my hope is that as part of that, we can get these conversations started that will involve implementing some changes that are long overdue in our city. So I know you've been a long partner in this region, and I'm not necessarily anxious to try and make a change to who provides the poles and the lines and that sort of thing. But I do hope that SDG&E will engage in the conversation about how an investor-owned utility can make investments that benefit our community. So thanks for the presentation. And my hope is that you can get the issues out on this circuit in Liebenheim resolved.
Thank you, Councilmember Kranz. And I mean, yes, we would love to work with you on all the things that you just spent time touching on, undergrounding, looking into more ways that we can partner with you, investigation of microgrids within the city of Encinitas. There are other microgrid installations that we did last year for different sites, not within city boundaries, but within areas of high fire threat districts and things of that nature, but would be happy to follow up with you and the team offline on some of the other items that you had discussed and how we can start those conversations and investigations. So
great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Katie. We will move on to our next item. So our next item is a proclamation in honor of Black History Month, which I'm excited to bring forward today. So Black History Month is observed in February of each year. And whereas, I'll go ahead and read this proclamation. It's really good. Whereas Black History Month seeks to emphasize Black history and its cultural contributions to American life, and is designed to recognize and pay tribute to the many contributions of Black Americans to the history, society, and culture of the United States of America. And whereas Black History Month celebrates the achievements of Black Americans in arts, civil rights, education, entertainment, government, history, law, literature, medicine, military, music, politics, science, sports, and other endeavors. And whereas the city of Encinitas continues to work toward becoming an inclusive community in which all citizens, past, present, and future, are respected and recognized for their contributions and potential contributions to our community, the state, the country, and the world. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and city council of the city of Encinitas hereby proclaim February 2021 as Black History Month and encourage all residents to celebrate our diversity and continue our efforts to create a world that is more just, peaceful, and prosperous for all. And I'm excited to have Marlon Taylor here with us today. He is a newly elected member of the Encinitas Union School District, and we're really excited to have you in elected office and also to have you here today to accept the proclamation. So I'll hand it over to you. I'm handing you the proclamation virtually. Would you like to say a few words? Wait, you're on mute.
I knew that. Thank you for doing this. I think for me, this proclamation doesn't necessarily mark the end of anything, or, we're in the middle of Black History Month, but for me, I believe it marks and lets us know that there's still a lot to be done. There's a lot of work that we have to do, but this is a very strong and very positive start for the city. especially as we move forward and try to resolve some of these things regarding inequities and just to get us all on the same page with one another. I believe we're so close to being really, really strong, but we just have to have these conversations with one another, and proclamations like this will definitely get the conversation started. So thank you so much. Yeah, that's all I really have. I've kind of been working all day and
No, that's perfect. We appreciate your words and your wisdom and your perspective and your participation. So Black History Month is a really important thing to celebrate and to recognize. I've been so happy to see the Union Tribune every day is partnering with the History Center, the San Diego History Center, to put together a little blurb in every paper every day throughout Black History Month of all the various different contributions from our past in this county. And it's really been a nice elevation of that and a recognition. And it's important that, of course, we do it all year long, but focusing on it during February is something that I thought was important that we recognize. And I appreciate you being here today to accept it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for thinking about me, and thank you for inviting me to this. It really means a lot to me. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marlon. Okay, so now we'll move on to the rest of our agenda here. It is time for oral communications.
Yes, Mayor, we do have two. Our first speaker is Carol Green. And let's see.
Hear me?
We can hear you. You can start when ready, and you do have 3 minutes.
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Carol Green. I know that many of you have been concerned with the homeless situation and with mental health issues as they may contribute to the homeless situation. Mental health problems have their root in many factors. However, because marijuana businesses are also coming to Encinitas and increase the availability to normalize marijuana use, I just share short my experience with mental illness. My son, who was a brilliant, fantastic, great young man, had some mental health issues that he experienced. But he was doing well and he was medicated and he was seeing a psychiatrist and getting help. He went to San Diego State and his friends convinced him that he should go off of the prescribed medication and he should smoke weed instead because it helped anxiety and depression and all of didn't help any of those things. It made it all worse. And he experienced a psychotic break and experienced psychosis. I gotta just cut to the chase. He was hospitalized 3 times. THC was the only drug that was found in his system. And Michael died last December as a result of his mental illness. I just want you to understand that marijuana is not the panacea for all that ails people in the mental health. And there's actually strong correlation and possibly causation between marijuana and mental health issues. And I think you should research this and study it. Talk to real professionals, not just people who are trying to make money off of our kids. Thank you for letting me speak.
Well, Carol, we're so sorry to hear of your loss. There's nothing possibly worse to consider than losing a child, and we're so sorry to hear your story. And we are always considering all of our decisions very seriously, and we will continue to do that in relation to marijuana. So our hearts go out to you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Steve Norton. Steve, you can start when ready, and you do have 3 minutes.
Here I am.
There you are.
Dear council members, thank you for this opportunity to address you tonight. As long-term residents of a single-family home off of La Costa Avenue in Northwest Leucadia, my wife and I have been closely following the recent and very rapid development of our area. That development includes the imminent opening of the very large Lila Maria Hotel at La Costa and 101, and the numerous proposed houses, apartments, hotels, and multi-use developments in the mere 1 mile road from the I-5 to the 101 and slightly south from there. As daily walkers to Ponca Beach, we have been increasingly more concerned about our safety and that of bicyclists along La Costa Avenue, a 2-lane road without an elevated off-road sidewalk, unlike almost every other major transit road within our city. Not only have the car speeds remained in excess of the posted 35 mph, but as you very well know, drivers have become ever more distracted with the advent of cell phones and the perceived need to remain constantly connected to their work, family, and friends. Consequently, during our walks, we are constantly at risk, with our eyes always focused on oncoming traffic, largely because of the absence of a proper off-road sidewalk, and of course, the very hazardous La Costa Vulcan Avenue intersection. We speak to you tonight, however, in light of the city's very recent notice of preparation of a draft environmental impact report for the proposed Maria Village mixed-use development project just south of the new Alila Maria Hotel. Specifically within that notice, it states that the EIR will focus on 16 different environmental issue areas. The 14th item is transportation, which can be interpreted in a number of different ways, although I suspect that it does not include traffic and public safety. We would like to suggest to all members tonight that traffic and public safety should be a standalone topic of study and one at the top of the priority list for investigation, not the 14th out of 16 items, if in fact it is even included in the city's definition of transportation. Given the very severe traffic issues already highlighted in the February 2020 traffic study for the proposed apartment complex at La Costa and Vulcan, we simply cannot imagine any comprehensive EIR that does not address the major traffic and public safety issues and implications for La Costa Avenue, which the city managers hopefully continue to support maintaining as a 2-lane road. In sum, we ask that the city ensure that the forthcoming EIR fully address this very important topic, one which the city managers claim is of utmost importance when considering any future development within our city. And I might add, traffic and public safety should be thoroughly addressed before any future developments within this very small quadrant of our city. Specifically, the Lila Maria Hotel, Maria Village, the 1967 Vulcan Avenue apartment complex, and the likely development at Surface Point are all within 1/4 mile of each other. Please think of the huge associated traffic and public safety issues before going ahead with these proposed developments. Thank you in advance for all your consideration. Steve and Meg Norton.
That concludes oral communications.
Okay, thank you. So let's see. Next we have no report from closed session. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the posted agenda. Moving to consent calendar, we have nothing pulled by the public.
I would like to pull 3 items. Item 8C, D, and F.
And I'd like to pull 8A.
Okay, so I think we have B and E, right?
Yes, B, Bravo, and Echo. Yes.
B and E.
I'll
And
move
what?
over.
All of those untouched consent items.
Second.
Okay, did you get that, City Clerk? So
Yes,
it's,
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Crayons,
Yes.
and Mayor Blakespear.
yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We'll move to item 8A.
Okay, mine, it's hopefully just a quick fix. I think it's just something that needs to be edited. And it's on page 8 and it's item 4 and it's regarding just some notes on the concessions that were given to the city by the developer of Fox Point Farms. And number 4 says the funding of microtransit in Encinitas or the contribution of $75,000 to the San Diego Water District. And we just need to scratch the first part of that sentence, which is the funding of microtransit or the contribution. Because number 3, let's see, number 2 talks about microtransit, and number 4 talks about the contribution to the water district. And if that's not clear, I'm happy to write it in an email to make it more clear. But I just want to make sure that it's correct in the minutes and that it's also correct in the conditions that were described that night. I guess it wasn't a condition, but a concession.
We'll make sure that it matches the resolution as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all.
Well, and just to note that item 2 also says contribution of 50,000 towards microtransit, just like 4. So yeah, we need to make sure we read that really closely. Okay, so let's, I'll move approval of A.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Councilmember, or Deputy Mayor Krantz,
Yes.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. And now we move to item 8C.
8C, as in Charlie.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to raise the issue of the fact that our analysis and this implementation of a new speed limit is actually raising the speed limit. Is that correct, Abe?
Hello, good evening. Yes, Councilmember Krantz. Unfortunately, this is one of the few instances we end up raising the speed limit. The reason for that is the speed limit on the roadway down the years has been 25. I believe it was considered a residential prima facie a 25-mile-per-hour roadway. Our traffic sergeant and our traffic deputies from the sheriff department contacted us. Apparently, there has been some challenges to the prima facie 25-mile-per-hour at courts. And courts have said this. Apparently, the attorneys have challenged these 25-mile-per-hour tickets that there is no speed survey for this location. And the city is just enforcing 25-mile-per-hour residential prima facie per MUTCD and California Vehicle Code. And the deputies were apparently not very successful or not very satisfied with the outcome of the courts and the challenges. And they said, we can't continue enforcing it because there's no speed survey for this roadway. And they were correct. We have never done speed surveys for this piece of Via Cantabria because it always was considered 25-mile residential, but because of the nature of the project developments, the units that were there, their driveways not being onto the road, they asked us to do a speed survey, and we did utilize all the options that we had with lowering the speed limit to the 5-mile maximum that I'm allowed to. We did utilize all the options we had, but 30 was the lowest we could get. I mean, we could keep it at 25, but they literally told me that they couldn't enforce it anymore.
Okay, so what's the strategy for lowering the 85th percentile? I know there's a crosswalk right there. I know there's a bike lane right there. I know there's a baseball park right there. I know there's a soccer field right there. I know there's a big shopping center. There's people crossing the street all the time. There's a trail that comes out, and there's a crosswalk that we don't have any flashing signals for. There's a lot of reasons why increasing the speed limit here really sucks. And so the other issue has to do with the analysis of a stop sign, which I had requested back, I think 6 or 7 months ago. Is that still going to be analyzed, or what is the plan for that?
Correct. Very good point. So to answer separately, we do have the option of, we did recently introduce that crosswalk and we modified some signage and striping. We still have the option of adding rectangular flashing beacon. But as you mentioned, we have a stop sign that is already analyzed. The report is ready to go. The reason, it's been ready for like 2-3 months. The reason that we didn't bring that stop sign to the Traffic Commission before the City Council is the direction from Council that we have to modify our policy of our stop signs for notifying public. So that item is on the agenda next week. So as soon as Council approves our proposal for modification of our citywide stop sign policy with regards to how we notify public ahead of taking the item to traffic commission. That stop sign, I can tell you, obviously it's informal because it doesn't yet have the approval and the ordinance, but that location was warranted. So as soon as we notify public and we take it to traffic commission, get their blessing, bring to council with the ordinance, that location would get a stop sign, hopefully, again, if the process follows. And as soon as that stop sign goes in, I will revisit this. I promise I'll bring it back because that stop sign will drastically affect the 85th percentile, I'm sure. It would hopefully lower the speed limit. So when that stop sign goes in, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months, we will revisit this. But this was a request that we had from our sheriff's office to do a survey, and we did it.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. It's good for the public to know. I would say to the motorcycle officers, a radar patrol at the bottom of that hill would be like shooting fish in a barrel. I would guess that they could get a significant number of speeding citations. And that enforcement, I think, is one of the issues that one of the ways that we could really affect traffic speeds is by, making it clear to people that they will be cited if they are speeding. And that stretch of Via Cantabria is very busy with young kids and a lot of activity. So I would ask that we continue to monitor and take the actions necessary to reduce speeds. So with that, I would move approval.
Okay, thank you. I will second that. And I see Councilmember Mosca has his hand up.
Yeah, I was hoping to get my 2 cents in before that motion hit the table. But I think in general, I think we shouldn't be going in the direction of increasing the speed limit in our city. We have a number of streets that we need to look at to lower the speed limit. And I have a hard time thinking that we should be increasing the speed limit for all of the reasons that Deputy Mayor Kranz just stated. This is right next to Leo Mullen Park. We have a ton of kids on their e-bikes, on their skateboards, coming in and out of that park. I cannot get behind increasing the speed limit. I continue to think that what we need to do is engineer these roads so that people are going slower and not faster. And so I'm not going to support increasing the speed limit, especially thinking that in a very short period of time, that we'll have other mechanisms out there that may, from an engineering perspective, may actually slow people down. But I'm not going to support increasing the speed limit, in an area that is very sensitive. And what I think we should be doing in all parts of our city is engineering our roads to make them slower. And not necessarily getting caught, behind the 8 ball and needing to increase the speed limit because we've not, addressed the road properly. And this goes with El Camino Real too. I don't want to get a speed study saying that we need to increase the speed limit. We want a target of 35 throughout that corridor, and we ought to be looking at that road to make sure that we're engineering it in a way that is going to allow us to have that target speed. 25 on our residential areas and 35 on that commercial corridor. I don't think that it makes sense to go above 25 on this road.
I appreciate your sentiments. I would say just a couple things. One, the speed survey gives the citations some teeth. I don't want to waste our officers' time because anyone they cite can get off on a technicality because we don't have a speed survey. Furthermore, I think that we now have a speed survey. So I think that's one of our challenges is that we have the speed survey. We don't really have a choice. I guess we could leave it 25, but it just seems like a waste of time. I think the key part of this conversation and the reason I pulled it, and I'm glad Abe stuck around, is that we can, we're gonna take some steps that I think will have a significant effect on the speeds through that stretch. And so I'm willing to give the police officers some teeth to their citations in the interim period that we're waiting for the next step to take place. So that's why I made the motion to approve this item, and we'll continue to support it. I understand your position and certainly appreciate it.
Right, no, and I was going to pull 8C and 8D to talk to them as well. And
Well, let's move forward with this one and then we can talk about the next ones, okay?
All right, just one comment. I mean, I understand, and what Deputy Mayor Kranz was saying. I just think that in a very short, there are many streets in our city whereby the speed limit is not necessarily supported by a survey at this point. We know that, and I'm not suggesting that the street stay that way forever, but in a very short period of time, we'll have other devices out there that could, make a difference in terms of this speed limit. And I think that it probably is better to keep it at 25 than to increase it to 30 at this point, and then allow the staff to do what they need to do to engineer that road properly.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and vote. I'll just say I support the motion. I'm continuing to support the motion because I think most people who are speeding are actually going like 50 and they can get a ticket at 30, but they can't get a ticket for 25. So I would like us to have something that's more enforceable, which is essentially what the motion maker stated. So let's go ahead and vote on this.
Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
No.
Deputy Mayor Kranz,
Yes.
and Mayor Blake Spear.
Yes.
Motion carries with Councilmember Mosca voting no. We now move to item 8D.
Hallelujah. I'm so excited to see this item on the agenda and that we're getting finally to the point where we are doing a circulation element update, which I hope becomes the mobility element. The only request that I have, and it was a little frustrating to see that it's going to take a couple years to complete this. I know there's a lot of work and I understand why it takes that length of time, but we desperately need to accelerate the conversation around the La Costa Avenue corridor. So my request would be that staff work with the consultant to figure out how we can engage that neighborhood and that part of the community to address issues related to speed, the question of 4 lanes versus 2, sidewalks, bike facilities, all these sort of things really quickly. I know that, Joe outsmarted the rest of us and got the conversation about Rancho Santa Fe started prior to actually kicking off the circulation element conversation. And because La Costa was, classified differently in a way that I think that would make trying to have a conversation about it very difficult, I didn't try and kick off that conversation early, but it's pretty clear that that was a mistake, that we should have been having a much more robust conversation sooner. I know the Traffic Commission has had a lot of conversations about La Costa Avenue, Vulcan and Sheridan and Andrew and Eolis and Hillcrest. And, so that it's been ongoing, but it's not been conducted in a way that is conducive to kind of bringing everybody to the table to have a unified conversation. And I think that under the auspices of this circulation element update, it might be possible to have that particular conversation. So I would, I'm supportive of this item. I would only like to add some direction to staff to bring back a conversation about how we can accelerate the discussion regarding La Costa Avenue and Northwest Leucadia. So I would move approval with that staff direction.
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Mosca.
Yeah, so I share the excitement of Deputy Mayor Kranz and the entire City Council. We've been talking about this for a while, so I'm happy that it's here. Just had a couple of questions for staff. Just looking over the scope here, I think it's impressive. And so, although I would add what Deputy Mayor Kranz was talking about in terms of specific increased engagement in the northwest portion of the city, just had a question about the consultant here that we're hiring, WSP USA. Is it Ed, Abe, or who's?
If I could ask Jennifer Gates and Lillian to please turn on your cameras. Thank you. I got the whole crew and Roy.
Oh.
And Abe. Abe is part of our team too.
And Abe, wow.
Don't exclude Abe.
Nobody's at home tonight.
I don't know if Abe is still on, but he is part of our staff team for the circulation element, of course.
So tell me a little bit more about WSP USA. I tried to look them up and I saw a little bit of information, and there's some sub-consultants that are working on this too. Tell me a little bit more about what they've done. Point me in the direction of cities that they've worked for and where the city has a similar values to ours in terms of desire for a multimodal system. I mean, I see in the scope that they certainly kind of talk the talk, and I just wanted to understand. In a brief moment, I was able to kind of look some information up, but I wasn't able to get as much. And so you guys had said that they were responsive to the bid, and so just wanted to understand who they are. Have they ever done work for us before? What cities have they done work for, and what cities would be similarly situated to Encinitas in terms of sharing the values for advancing multimodal system?
I will look at the city question as we're talking about this, and Abe can help with some of the background also on WSP. But WSP is who we utilized for the Cross Connect project, so that they just completed that. WSP also has worked on our study for the quiet zone. They work with Sandag a lot on a lot of the traffic consultations, and that was part of their connection with Sandag and the modeling system and things like that that we were listening to. And so it wasn't just their experience with circulation elements and with the movement of the mode shift and those conversations, but it was the team they put together also with Fair and Pierce and KTUA, who KTUA we've worked with a lot in the city as well. And then Recon is going to be doing that environmental component. I'm going to look up exactly which cities that they were talking about specifically. And if Abe wanted to give a little bit more experience, if they've done any projects specifically with WSP or Fair and Pierce and KTUA.
If I could add, also WSP was the consultant that we utilized for the rail corridor vision study that we conducted. They are the consultant for that. That was part of the coastal mobility and livability study. So, but like Jennifer said, it's not just WSP, it was also the subcontractors that they established or created as part of their team, including K2E. That was also part of the coastal mobility and livability study, focusing on the active transportation component of that study.
So they certainly know us, and which is probably why they were able to be competitive as well. But in terms of other cities that they've worked for, or counties or governments that they've worked for, where we can kind of say, oh yeah, this is the plan that they put together for other cities, and it certainly was in sync with our values.
So it sounds like they're still maybe looking, but that does sound like a lot of involvement in our city. I just want to make sure at the beginning of this comment, Councilmember Kranz said, I hope this will turn into, what was it you were saying you hope it turns into?
Mobility element instead of a circulation element.
Okay, so is that the kind of thing that could be like a name change that happens as part of this process, and it updates our general plan to say mobility element? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yeah. I think that that's what they call it in Carlsbad, and I think that, the multimodal aspect is really important, and, the fact that that WSP was involved in the coastal mobility and livability, the Cross Connect, all these studies, they're very well regarded in the rail industry. Obviously, we have, the challenge of mobility across our rail corridor. I think it's an excellent choice, and I think that the key part is that we have the relationship with them on all these other studies, and we want to drive the element that ends up being drafted here. Right. And, they may have done something for Irvine, but, I don't know that that's going to fit. And when the general plan update of 2000 aughts blew up, it was because the consultant came in with essentially a whole, it was the same, key, same document that he'd used for several other cities, and it didn't work for us, Right. So having a consultant that's familiar with our community is pretty daggum important. And so I was pleased to see who had been selected, and I look forward to them having the opportunity to get started. And because I'm going to be asking for drafts pretty fast.
Yeah, no, it sounded like we had, I mean, they definitely know our city. But, you know, some furtherance in terms of, you know, if you know, that they've actually put together plans that we know that they're not car-centric plans, and that they're actually, you know, plans that really are demonstrating innovation and kind of advanced thinking in these areas.
Well,
I think Lillian has her hand up too. Maybe she could jump in here with what she wants to say. Go ahead, Lillian.
So I did want to mention that we did interview this entity, this contractor, as well as others, because we wanted to make sure that the contractor did understand the vision that we have for the circulation element, or if it becomes a mobility element, and I'll defer to Roy on that question. But we asked all of those questions. Climate Action Plan Program Manager Crystal Nahara was on the panelists that interviewed the contractors, because it is important to us that we are inclusive of all of the values. And certainly she represented a series of questions that ensured that this contractor was aware of our desire for mobility shifts. They really impressed us with their ability to think out of the box and to ask those questions. How are people traveling? How are they traveling on foot? Where are they going? What is the most effective way, efficient way, and how can they implement a better way of thinking for our city to improve traffic flows, not just for cars, but for the modes of traffic, including e-bikes that we're seeing more and more today. So I think that they did demonstrate that as part of the interview process, and we did hear that from them, which is why they are our top choice for a contractor for the circulation element. Jennifer, have you had a chance to identify those other cities?
So a lot of so I have the list right in front of me right now. So Encinitas, local knowledge, project experience. We talked about the coastal mobility and livability study. They worked on the housing element update, EIR, the rail corridor vision plan, the cross connect implementation plan, the Encinitas transit feasibility study, the Encinitas coastal rail trail planning. They've also done the City of National Cities Focused General Plan update, City of San Diego's Complete Community Housing Solutions and Mobility Choices. They, with Fair and Pierce. Fair and Pierce also is part of this. So one of the big pieces with the circulation element now is SB 743 implementation. So also part of that experience comes with the City of San Diego's mobility modeling tool, the City of Chula Vista's SB 743 implementation, Carlsbad's SB 743 implementation, and then Escondido's 743 implementation.
All right. I just have one last question. By the way, Jennifer, do you work on every single part of city government? Like, you're our housing expert, our transportation expert. You're doing everything.
We have a lot of projects going on that are long range.
Thank you for everything you do, and the entire team. So I was happy with when I looked at the scope, the engagement with the city council. But I was just wondering, Lillian, in terms of our new mobility commission, or traffic, whatever we're going to call the former traffic and public safety commission, what's the plan with them? Are we going to have like a kind of a subcommittee of this commission working with the consultant, or are we going to have so many engagements with them? I think it's important that they're at the table and they're working with the circulation element consultant.
So, I'll defer to Jennifer, but I believe that, first the city would be working to set the parameters and the immediate goals for the study, as well as working through initial drafts. And then we would certainly solicit input and feedback from the commissioners. And I believe that's built into the scope. Jennifer, is that right?
In the general sense of, the involvement of lots of different community aspects, including the committee. So whether or not that is a city staff giving the presentations and giving updates on a regular basis, if that is the desire and request of city council and that committee, then we are more than willing to do that and give those updates and get the feedback at that time. But we can also work into the scope at some key points to make sure that that discussion gets brought in to include them. And we can work on that scope to include those specific key time frames.
I mean, specifically from this council member, I think including commissions and, I mean, relevant commissions and committees, you know, especially the Traffic and Public Safety or Mobility Commission, I think that's important. And a lot of those folks are going to want to help and dig deep on this. So I think that we should put in the scope that they're going to at least be presented to and solicited their input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll call on you, Councilmember Krantz, but I just want to make a few comments myself first. So I support the choice of this contractor that seems well vetted and knows the city well, but I just want to say that my hope for this element is that we can have a plan that will then will solicit community feedback and feedback from the commissions and from the electeds, but we'll be able to create a plan which then we can execute against in a way that's driven by the staff bringing it forward to us in a way that proceeds forward. So, you know, not like our climate action plan, we have things that move forward because they're in our climate action plan and we're trying to meet goals and we are becoming a more sustainable city, but it doesn't require the council members to do council initiated items or kind of carrying every individual idea, that there's an overall vision for active transportation in the city, and then we're able to execute against that. So, you know, I will say that the Coastal Mobility and Livability Working Group and the plan that came out of that did not seem to have that kind of an action-oriented approach, and it was this consultant that did that. I think there was benefit to the community engagement, and there was a really heavy and serious engagement around the creation of the original section of the Coastal Rail Trail in Cardiff. But from there, it went into sort of a long period of study and analysis, and it did cost us close to $1 million, that contract. I think it was $900,000. This is another $600,000. And I think planning documents, when they are like the climate action plan and result in actions on the part of the city that forward our goals, are well worth it. But when we do plans that really we don't end up executing against with any haste, or don't see them as documents that are planning documents for the future, then it really isn't worth it. So, you know, we haven't updated this element in decades, so we know we need to do it because it's really out of date. But I just really want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what the goals are here when we get this plan, and that it really is not just to do it and check that box, but for all of us at the staff and the professionals who are the heads of these departments to be bringing these things forward. Your circulation, your mobility element says this, so we're bringing forward this speed reduction, this sidewalk improvement, this crossing of the rail corridor, this, you know, executing against that in those ways. So if there's anything that what I'm saying that you're thinking, oh no, that's actually not what this document is, or we're not planning to do that, I'd really, you know, like that to be raised here so that we can have a dialogue about how to create that type of momentum here in the city. Is the city manager or Jennifer or Lillian or anybody want to kind of address that point?
Just making sure I'm not on mute. So task K is the last task on this scope of work, and it specifically is to create develop strategies and to implement policies in the programs, and to also come up with some rough cost estimates to do some of this. So I believe that is not outside of this scope to actually put together kind of what those first, you know, those main projects or main implementation measures that need to get done. We are going to take those plans that we've already completed and feed those in to the circulation element as well as part of this process. So I don't see anything based on what you've just stated that would not be part of this scope.
Okay, good. Councilmember Krantz.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It'd be great to have a document that allowed for that sort of implementation. I think one of the things that's always been a challenge with issues related to circulation is the cost. And so, it's also important to note that the strategy that the city of Encinitas had essentially since incorporation is to implement improvements to the infrastructure as part of development. And so, you see on, for example, Hygeia, there are stretches of Hygeia that have sidewalks and other stretches that don't and probably never will. And so, if you say, okay, why is there no sidewalk on both sides of La Costa Avenue? It's largely because the city has always banked on development to that to be a required condition of development. So now we're in this situation where state law has essentially said your circulation element doesn't really matter. You're going to build these projects. And we're in a terrible situation where we don't have the supporting documents that would give us the guidance that we need on some of these projects. So again, I think that the key part is to accelerate this project, this circulation element update, so that especially in those areas where we're seeing housing element update development of high density projects, we look very closely at ways that we can mitigate traffic issues and enhance multimodal complete streets implementation. So I also would like to second Joe's, I don't know if it needs to be part of the motion or staff direction or what, but I hope that you will, that the planning team will seriously consider a formal subcommittee of the Traffic and Public Safety Commission, because we have some really strong members of that commission who are anxious to dive in, roll up their sleeves and help out. And so if there were a way to include them, it's my hope that you will. So I know that commission has their own ideas and how they might want to participate. And I would welcome them putting it on their agenda and come up with a strategy that works with city staff to tap into that energy and that knowledge base that we have on that commission.
Yeah, I agree. That mobility commission should absolutely be included in this process.
Are we already changing that name? Yes.
I'm adopting a new name.
As long as we all know what we're talking about, then that works. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to move approval of 8D.
We do have a motion and a second already.
Okay,
And
then good.
And Councilmember Crayons or Deputy Mayor Crayons, do you want me to include the subcommittee as part of the motion?
Yeah, I would. If that's okay with the seconder, I would add that to the motion.
Is that okay with you, Councilmember Mosca?
Yes, friendly amendment.
Can you just make the motion clear again for all of us?
It's a staff recommendation, and then with the addition of direction to staff to accelerate the La Costa Avenue and Northwest Leucadia area, and to consider a formal subcommittee of the Traffic and Public Safety Commission.
I mean, is that how you want to have this organized? It seems like from your comments, Councilmember Crayons, you were saying you would like the staff and consultants to figure out how to utilize the Traffic Commission, but you don't really want them to be a formal subcommittee, right?
Well, if it's, I know that there are some members of that commission who would like to form a subcommittee. So I'm not saying that necessarily is a requirement, but I hope that the staff will work with the Traffic and Public Safety Commission to be sure that they're engaged to the highest level that is feasible. And, it seems to me that a subcommittee might be able to do that. But the answer to your question is I don't want to tie their hands and direct that they do any particular thing, because that commission may have a different idea about how to engage. Maybe they want to put it on their agenda to talk about it every month and have it as an agenda item, and the whole commission talks about it. So, if that's too much to expect of the consultant and staff, then maybe that's not going to work. And maybe they'd rather have somebody that was going to come as a subcommittee member and get a briefing at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday or whatever. So, I think that the phraseology should be for staff to work with the Traffic and Public Safety Commission to engage them to the highest degree feasible.
I thought the key term that Kathy had said was considered. that they should consider. So it doesn't say they have to or they must, it'll be considered.
Okay, do you want me to change it to, and staff to consider how to effectively utilize the Traffic and Public Safety Commission?
Okay.
I like that.
That's good.
Okay. All right, we're ready to vote. Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz,
Yes.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. And now we move to item 8F.
8F, very briefly, thank you for this update. It makes a whole lot of sense. I appreciate all the work that Abe has done since he was hired. I know he worked with Karen very closely and the neighborhoods to come up with this tiering program. There are speed cushions on my street now, when previously the program really didn't allow it, because I had to get the neighborhood, Hygeia, the folks on Hygeia had to get the people on Hermes and Hymettus both to agree to let us put in speed cushions. And why would they when they love to cut through on Hygeia and speed? So this particular program made it possible, and Abe's efforts, I appreciate it. And these revisions are very logical. The only thing that I would ask is that this document, this tiering, is part of it. We're calling it the speed cushion program, but my understanding is that's part of our Encinitas neighborhood traffic management program, isn't it, Abe?
That is correct, council member. The way, I wasn't with the city at the time when the ENTMP, Encinitas Neighborhood Traffic Management Program, was formed.
No.
After that document was formed, I mean, it was extensive work from staff and community, and I believe there was a consultant that was hired. Staff at that time noticed that implementing that program is very, very complicated and takes a lot of time and effort. That's where the first tier was introduced to the program.
Yep.
The goal is to basically see if the first tier is functional and satisfactory. There is also satisfactory if we get to a point that after implementing the first tier, we don't get the results that we're after and we still have serious issues. That's where we start the second and third phases of the ENTMP. Luckily, we have been fortunate so far. The implementations have all been successful and the speed limits have gone down and residents have been happy, and really didn't have the need to spend like 6 months following the phase 2 of the ENTMP for a specific location. But we have that option. We can always tap into that.
Yes, and I think that the reason I mostly wanted to talk about this is that as long as we're looking at our the circulation/mobility element update, maybe we should be looking at updates to the ENTMP. And I know that that will require staff time and effort, and but I would like to ask, as we approve this item, which is what I would move, that we also direct staff to identify other ways that we might update this program. I know that the toolkit that's in the back of the book, probably a lot of those traffic calming measures are still valid, but maybe there are some additional ones that have come into favor amongst traffic engineers. So I just think that whether it's an assignment for the Traffic and Public Safety Commission or staff, that a review of that document and update of some of the chapters might be in order. So, and it was something that I had been advocating for when Rob Blau was the city traffic engineer. It never happened because we got focused on this tiering program and the ability to put in speed cushions. And now that that's seems to be moving along successfully, I just would love to see the ENTMP document as a whole analyzed for possible changes as well. But with that, I would move approval of this item and ask the city manager and staff to analyze, the ENTMP for possible updating of other chapters.
I'll second that motion, and with the additional direction. I think that's good, solid direction.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz,
Yes.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We conclude the consent calendar and we now move to action item 10A.
Okay, let's turn it over to staff to handle that item.
Good evening, Mayor Blake Spear and council members. I hope that you're hearing me. I clicked on my video, but I'm not seeing it. Start my video, thank you. Hooray, okay. Okay, wonderful. I'm joined this evening by Irene Abraham, who is the chair of the Arts Commission. And so the two of us will be available at the end of this agenda report to answer any questions you may have. And let's get rolling with. Great. I hope you're seeing this PowerPoint presentation. Okay. So as part of the North Coast Corridor program, the two Interstate 5 undercrossings located at Santa Fe Drive and Encinitas Boulevard were redesigned. The city had the opportunity to work with Caltrans and add artistic elements to the sidewalls of the undercrossings, which would reflect the culture of the city and the different communities in Encinitas. The council approved artistic elements at the Encinitas Boulevard consist of a 3-foot tall horizontal ribbon of mosaic artwork on each of the 4 curved north and south walls. The artwork would consist of approximately 850 square feet of mosaic and would be created by a professional artist or artist team. The undercrossing was completed in August of 2020, and a request for proposal for artists was issued by the city on September 3rd. 14 artist proposals were received. An ad hoc committee was formed consisting of 3 members of the Commission for the Arts, Irene Abraham, Aaron Seelert, and Jeffrey Redlitz, and 2 professional public artists, Betsy Schultz and Ann Mudge. The ad hoc committee reviewed and ranked the proposals and selected 3 artists as finalists. The ad hoc committee conducted Zoom studio tours with the 3 artists, held extensive interview, and they also selected, they also received samples of mosaics from each of the artists so that they could see in person the materials they were going to use and get a much better example of their work. The 3 finalists were artist Amy Bauer, artist Cheryl Tall, and artist Amanda Siebert. I'm sorry, Amanda Siebel, pardon me. The ad hoc committee held a final meeting to review the 3 finalists, and by a majority vote, oh, pardon me, I jumped ahead. A public arts survey was conducted from November 19th through December 3rd to allow the public to review and select their favorite design from the top 3 finalists. A total of 1,051 votes were received by the public. Amy Bauer received 368 votes and was the top choice by the public. The ad hoc committee held a final meeting to review the 3 finalists and by a majority vote selected artist Amy Bauer's proposal as their choice. The recommendation was forwarded to the Commission for the Arts, and on Monday, December 7th, the Commission unanimously approved by the recommendation by the ad hoc committee to select artist Amy Bauer's design. The staff recommendation that is before you is to review and vote on the proposed artist recommendation from the Commission for the Arts and to authorize the city manager in consultation with the city attorney to execute an agreement in substantial form in the amount of $140,000 and a 10% contingency of $14,000 for the project if additional work is needed, for a project total not to exceed $154,000. This concludes the agenda report. Irene and myself are available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. All of them were amazing and gorgeous, and we're really excited to have them to have a beautiful public art piece there. So I'm really grateful for all the work that was done. Do we have public comments on this?
No, we do not.
Okay. Well, I'd like to give Irene a chance to just say a few words if she wants. I totally support the decision of the commission and also the survey, which it seems like they're in alignment, which is always great. And it's beautiful. I think all three were beautiful. I had a hard time choosing which one, I would have chosen, just all on my own. And I'm really excited to be moving forward with this. So I'll turn it over to you, Irene, if you want to say a few words.
Okay, sure. We were very impressed by all the applications, and especially the top three that we looked at, and we used a lot of criteria for our final decision. We looked at the design, the experience of the artist, which is very important, the project narrative, their financial conditions, and information about their budget, and also about a big factor we looked at was the experience and the ability of the artist to bring this project to fruition in a timely fashion. And Amy Bauer's project, we came out on top, and in large part it was because it's a very innovative use of mosaics. She has a technique where she actually, it's kind of like a modern day stained glass technique where she uses a printer to print on her ceramic plates and then fuse them in the kiln so that you end up with glass fused on the mosaic tiles. And it's a very beautiful and luminous product that comes out. And we were really excited when we saw her samples. So, and we think her design also was a very contemporary vision, a contemporary art vision, and a contemporary vision of what Encinitas is all about. So that was a big part of our decision process.
Well, thank you for those comments. That really adds some richness to the understanding of this. I'm going to move approval of this. Thank you so much for your personal help, for the committee, for this professional staff, for the amazing art community we have in this city. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue this and have more mosaics. And the idea of having one at City Hall has been floated. I love that idea. So I will make a motion here and call on Councilmember Krantz.
I would second that. I also am excited about this. Looking at the kind of blank stone wall has been pretty boring, and this will definitely liven things up. I think that it's interesting to compare this with Santa Fe, and I think that if, there will never be another project like this, so I don't know that this really matters, but it would have been interesting to try and combine the two so that you had the ribbons on the end as well as some mosaics in the underneath the bridge, because I think one of the things that we brought to Santa Fe was some interesting visual aspects as you were walking under the bridge. So that I think would have been nice on Encinitas Boulevard as well. I also want to know who will be managing the pay schedule. I know that there's a monthly invoice that we will get from the artist, and I'm assuming that the payments will be divided into a certain number of months based upon how long they will take. And will you be monitoring the work and make sure that as the artist is paid that the work is acceptable and moving along as planned?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I'll be working with Crystal Roth here in the Parks Rec Cultural Arts Department, and we have a payment schedule in place that pays at strategic key points in the process.
Okay, great. And before we vote, I guess one of the things that we've never really had the opportunity to do is celebrate formally at a council meeting the success of the Santa Fe mosaic projects. And it's my hope, I know we had the pandemic and all that stuff, so it's kind of put a damper on the ability to celebrate outdoors. But maybe we can figure out a way to do it online and bring some of the artists onto the Zoom and give everybody a chance to take a bow for the efforts that they made up there. So I hope that we can do that before too long. unless we think we're going to have meetings again soon and the ability to meet in public, you know, I would like to take the opportunity to thank all the tremendous artists that participated in that project.
That's a great idea. And I would also like to encourage the city to, this artist who's doing this mosaic, to have the narrative of what she sees in there and why she chose this, to have that be part of our communication outreach that we're hopefully revitalizing here, so that we can do a little video and interview with her and put it on our social media account saying, this is this art piece and why it looks this way. What is it saying? What's its story? And I think that would be a really useful thing. And that would be really fascinating for a lot of people. Councilmember Mosca.
Yeah, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Irene, and to the artists and the Arts Commission for making this space that much more interesting. Have another concrete wall for you to make more interesting. I was actually talking to our city manager, Pam, about this yesterday. That big concrete wall in front of City Hall, can you do something with it? Can you invite some artists to do something with that wall? Because I think if you can improve that space, I think you've done a lot to improve the quality of life in Encinitas. So go at it.
Okay.
We'll consult about that. How's that?
Sounds good.
Yeah, the skaters will appreciate mosaics. They like the thrill of dropping off of that monument sign down to D Street. So
well, it could be practical art. It could be useful art, like maybe.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for this exciting new piece of art. Let's go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Hensy,
Yes.
Councilmember Mosca,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kranz,
Yes.
and Mayor Blakespear.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. And thank you again, Irene. I know you logged in for the
Thank you.
water board meeting and have been here this whole time. So I appreciate your dedication.
I'm sorry you couldn't see me, but
It's
I
okay.
get my video to work.
Okay, so we don't have any council member initiated items. Do we have any reports that people want to share? Okay, briefly, Councilmember Mosca.
Yeah, briefly. So thank you, Madam Mayor, for helping make me the Losan board representative from Sandag and Councilmember Shea Hensy as the alternate. I attended my first meeting of Losan board the other day or a couple of days ago, and it was really interesting. And so it was my first meeting. We've gone through the business plan and we had some budget items, and so it was really interesting. And there were a couple of folks that were going off. I took Ellie from Del Mar seat on that board, and so they were just kind of saying goodbye to Ellie and John Fasada, who is a longtime Los Angeles representative from MTA that I knew from my days up in Los Angeles. So it was good to say goodbye to them and then see some of the new board members coming on. But for those of you that are not like Deputy Mayor Kranz, who's engaged in these issues, Losan board actually manages the Pacific Surfliner, the train that comes from San Luis Obispo down to San Diego. And we also work to make that rail corridor safe, reliable in terms of the service, and make sure the rates we're generating revenue and keeping the rates as low as possible. I think that's what we do, Deputy Mayor Kranz, right? And we work with all of the rail operators. So I'm learning a lot. It's really interesting. And there's also a connection with Metrolink. And so this responsibility, Madam Mayor, is fairly large. So thank you.
Yes, well, I thought it would be a good opportunity. I know you're interested in transportation issues, and then Councilmember Hensy is the alternate. And, you know, as the chair of Sandag, I make a lot of appointments to a lot of boards. So this was an opportunity to help forward, you know, some really good people on these regional boards.
Thank you. It's really interesting.
I represented NCTD on Losan board for several years, and it was during the time that they were forming as a JPA. And it's pretty interesting, JPA, the number of agencies that are part of it. And it is the second busiest corridor in the nation, second to the Eastern Seaboard corridor. But a lot of challenges and a lot of work ahead to try and get rail to recover from the pandemic. So I wish you all the best in that, and make sure that when you attend those meetings, you go by rail.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, when you start attending in person again.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm zooming into Orange County now.
Yeah.
Okay, any other reports people want to share? What about a city manager report?
One quick report, Madam Mayor. I just want to bring all of your attention to the new My Encinitas app, which replaced C-Click Fix. And if you haven't downloaded it, it's up and running. It's both for Android and Apple products. So this will definitely expand our ability to report issues and also gives us a better follow-up on the back end. But for residents out there, it's just a better app to be able to report issues and problems. So all of this information can be found on our website. If you search under My Encinitas app, and you'll be able to find it and download it. And that's it.
Okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up. How about our city clerk report?
I have nothing to report.
Well, what about a report on the council's, the council seat?
Oh, the council, so District 3 vacancy, we did receive, we have 13 eligible applications. Those are all posted on the website. We had a lot of phone calls asking, so those have been posted on the website. The agenda report will be out later tomorrow, and all the applicants have been invited to a next week's city council meeting at 6 o'clock, and that will be the first action item, is to hear the interviews of the applicants, and then for the city council to consider an appointment.
Okay, great. Thank you for the update. And each person will have 5 minutes to speak to the council.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, a city attorney report.
No report this evening, Your Honor, in council.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We will see you next week on the 24th, and we are adjourned.